In 1980, a 12-year-old boy named Frank Gotti was riding his bicycle in Queens, New York, when a neighbor's car struck and killed him. His father, a mid-level mob associate at the time, never recovered from it. But what he did next didn't just change him. It revealed exactly who he was. And it set off a chain of events that would make him the most famous gangster in America. This is the side of John Gotti that most people never get told. John Gotti grew up poor in the South Bronx and later Queens, one of 13 children. From an early age, the streets were both his playground and his school. By his teens, he was running errands for local mob figures, drawn not just by the money, but by the respect. The way men in suits were treated differently from everyone else around him. He dropped out of school at 16 and never looked back. By his 20s, he was a full member of the Gambino crime family, specializing in truck hijackings and loan sharking. He was smart, fearless, and had a temper that could fill a room. His bosses noticed. But he was still just another soldier, one of hundreds of men working the streets of New York. Nobody outside the mob knew his name. That was about to change. In March 1980, Frank Gotti, 12 years old, was struck by a car driven by a neighbor named John Favara while riding his bicycle near their Queens home. It was an accident. Favara was devastated. He sent letters of condolence to the family and even tried to sell his house and move away. It wasn't enough. 4 months later, John Favara disappeared. He was never seen again. No body was ever found. No one was ever charged. When investigators asked John Gotti about it, he denied knowing anything. When they asked his wife, she said she had no idea where Favara had gone. The neighborhood stayed quiet, the way it always did when the Gottis were involved. What's rarely discussed is what the loss of Frank did to Gotti himself. People who knew him described a change, a coldness that hadn't fully been there before, a recklessness that made him harder to predict and harder to control. Some historians of organized crime believe the grief accelerated his ambition, as if losing his son made ordinary fear irrelevant. If the worst had already happened, what was left to be afraid of? In 1985, Gotti made his most audacious move. Paul Castellano, the boss of the Gambino family, one of the most powerful crime organizations in America, was shot dead outside a Manhattan steakhouse in a carefully planned assassination. Gotti had ordered it. It was one of the most brazen mob killings in decades, and Gotti didn't hide from it. He stepped into the role of boss as if he'd been born for it. In a world where mob bosses stayed in the shadows, Gotti did the opposite. He held court publicly at his social club in Queens. He wore $2,000 suits and got a fresh haircut every single morning. He talked to reporters. He smiled for cameras. Everyone in law enforcement knew who he was. Everyone in New York knew who he was. And for years, they couldn't touch him. Between 1984 and 1990, the federal government tried to convict John Gotti 3 times. 3 times, he walked free. The press gave him a nickname, the Teflon Don. Nothing stuck. But it wasn't magic, it was strategy. Gotti understood something that most mob bosses didn't. In the television age, public image was armor. He cultivated his neighborhood, throwing enormous 4th of July parties in Queens every year, with fireworks, free food, and hundreds of families attending. He was a celebrity. Juries were made up of people from his neighborhood, people whose kids had eaten at his parties. Witnesses disappeared or changed their stories. It worked. The FBI was furious. They knew exactly what he was doing, and they couldn't stop it. One agent famously described watching Gotti wave at cameras outside his trial and thinking, "He's not just not afraid of us, he's enjoying this." What finally brought Gotti down wasn't better police work. It was a betrayal from inside. Salvatore "Sammy the Bull" Gravano had been Gotti's underboss, his closest confidant, his right hand for years. The two men had built the Gambino family together. Gravano was the enforcer, the one who made problems disappear. He had personally committed 19 murders. He was, by any measure, one of the most dangerous men in New York. And he was also the man who ended John Gotti. In 1991, with federal charges mounting and the prospect of spending the rest of his life in prison becoming very real, Gravano made a calculation. He had heard the FBI's secret recordings made inside Gotti's own social club, recordings in which Gotti spoke openly and carelessly about murders, about ordering hits, about running the family. Worse, on those same tapes, Gotti could be heard criticizing Gravano by name, throwing his own underboss under the bus to protect himself. That was the moment Gravano decided. If Gotti was willing to sacrifice him to save himself, then loyalty was already dead. He contacted the FBI. The government couldn't believe it at first. Gravano was one of the highest-ranking mob figures ever to become an informant. He admitted to 19 murders and agreed to testify against Gotti in exchange for a reduced sentence. It was a deal that shocked the entire criminal underworld. With Gravano on the stand and the secret tapes in evidence, there was nothing left for Gotti to spin. No jury to charm, no cameras to wave at. In 1992, John Gotti was convicted of murder and racketeering and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He was sent to a maximum security federal penitentiary in Marion, Illinois, one of the harshest in the country, designed specifically for the most dangerous inmates. Unlike the social clubs and courtroom steps where he had spent his years performing for the public, Marion was silent and unforgiving. Gotti spent much of his time there in solitary confinement. The man who had thrown parties for thousands, who had waved at cameras on courthouse steps, who had beaten the government 3 times and called himself untouchable, died mostly alone in a prison cell in 2002 at the age of 61. Throat cancer. No cameras. No crowd. John Gotti was not the most powerful mob boss America ever produced. He wasn't the most violent, or the wealthiest, or the most strategically gifted. But he may have been the last one who truly believed he could win. Not by staying hidden, but by being impossible to ignore. He lost a son and turned grief into something dangerous. He turned a courtroom into a stage and the press into an audience. And in the end, the same openness that made him famous made him vulnerable. The FBI didn't need to catch him. They just needed to wait for someone close enough to him to finally decide he wasn't worth protecting. If stories like this one, the hidden side of the men history remembers as monsters, are what you're here for, this channel is built for you. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next.